An unseen hand, like an invisible hand, gripped my internal organs, violently pulling my remaining consciousness back from the endless darkness. I opened my eyes abruptly. What I saw wasn't the familiar modern laboratory or the cold, sophisticated instruments, but rows of thick, heavy wooden stakes, black and shiny, covered in soot and grease. The air was filled with the pungent smell of wood ash, the odor of cheap tobacco, and a faint metallic stench. I tried to sit up, my body aching and weak, as if it were falling apart. A fragment of a memory that wasn't mine, accompanied by a suffocating pain, flooded my mind like a tidal wave. My name is Xiaoran. Just a moment ago, I was a top-tier mechanical engineering PhD and the core chief engineer of a special equipment laboratory. To overcome the challenge of developing a high-strength military composite material, I worked continuously for 72 hours, eventually collapsing from exhaustion at the lab bench. And now, I've somehow transmigrated to a Han dynasty unlike any other in history, possessing the body of a poor, down-on-his-luck young blacksmith with the same name. The original owner's life was a complete tragedy. Born in a time of war and chaos, he lost his mother at a young age. His elderly father, relying on blacksmithing and meager farmland, poured all his family's savings into his education, hoping he would achieve success in the imperial examinations and bring honor to the family. But the original owner of this body had no talent for studying. After 10 years of hard work, he couldn't even get close to the next candidate. He passed away with endless regret. To pay for the funeral, the original owner emptied the family's coffers, leaving only the last grain of rice. For the next 2 weeks, he survived on a bowl of watery rice porridge, so thin you could see your reflection in it. This morning, due to extreme hunger and dizziness, he bumped his head against this wooden stake, swallowing his last mouthful, which allowed my soul to take over. Gurgle. My stomach growled incessantly, a stark reminder of the utter despair I felt at my current lowly position. This wasn't ordinary hunger. It was a life-or-death situation. In this ancient world where taxes were heavy and men were severely punished due to years of war, the Han dynasty issued a strict tax decree. Any man who was 20 years of age or older and unmarried without a legitimate reason had to get married within a year. Otherwise, he would not only be subject to a heavy single tax, but would also be forcibly conscripted by the government to serve in the army and sent to the dangerous border battlefield. The original owner had recently reported to the local village head, confidently promising that she would get married within a year. But who in the village didn't know that the Xiao family was so poor that even rats would leave in tears? In addition, the original owner was usually taciturn and aloof, so no family in the village was willing to push their perfectly good daughter into this fire pit. According to the laws of the Han dynasty, today is the deadline for the government to assign unmarried women to various villages. If I failed to choose a wife from among the assigned women and bring her home before sunset today, the government's bailiffs will tie me up and forcibly drag me to the front lines to be cannon fodder. What a tragedy! I just came back to life, and I can't even get a hot meal. I have to face a life-or-death test right now. I struggled to my feet, leaning against the wall, my legs wobbling. Just as I stepped into the dilapidated courtyard, a crisp, cold mechanical voice suddenly appeared in my mind. Ding! Detected extremely weak vital signs, core will to survive triggered, master craftsman of a great nation with military system is deeply binding. Binding successful. Current position, 10%. New player gift pack awarded, comprehensive basic physical enhancement, automatically applied to limbs and bones, master-level mechanical blueprint database, basic unlocked, and a portable alloy entrenching tool. A warm current instantly rose in his abdomen, and his previously weak and powerless limbs and bones, as if withered trees were reborn in spring, quickly generated a concentrated and abundant strength. The dizziness of that life-or-death struggle was dissipating, replaced by the agility and clarity of the Arctic. I took a deep breath, suppressing the shock and elation I felt. As a top mechanical engineering expert, I knew all too well what a system capable of assisting in manufacturing and enhancement meant. In this ancient feudal society with its immense productivity, this was an absolute game-changer, a survival trump card. Is that brat from the Shao family dead at home? If he's not, get to the village entrance right now. The government officials and their men are already there. If you're late, you'll be in big trouble. A crude and arrogant shout suddenly came from outside the door, followed by a heavy knocking that made the dilapidated wooden door creak. It was the village headman, who had always been quick to embezzle money from widows and orphans. I snorted coldly, straightened the original owner's faded coarse cloth clothes covered in stains, pushed open the door, and stepped out. The threshing ground at the village entrance was already bustling with activity. On the central stone platform stood 3 other unmarried men, all with equally grim expressions. The one on the left, with the hunched back, is a skinny man from the east end of the village who makes a living by carrying firewood for others. The one in the middle walks with a limp, a cripple who has injured his foot but can't afford a doctor. The one on the right, with slanted eyes and a crooked mouth, whose eyes reveal a sinister and sly look, is a scoundrel named Zhao San, who usually idles around and does petty sleight of hand, and is someone the villagers hate to the core but can't do anything about. Because these 4 men each had various flaws or reputations of poverty in the village, the onlookers pointed and whispered, while several teenagers even laughed and jeering, shouting at the top of their lungs. Look! The 4 great guardians of the Han Dynasty have all arrived. These 4 together deserve to be childless for life. I walked expressionlessly to the stone platform, ignoring the disdainful and harsh looks around me. In this chaotic world where human life is as worthless as grass, true worth is never determined by words, but by fists and strength. Not far away, a series of muffled hoofbeats and clattering sounds approached from afar. Several government officials dressed in black robes and carrying fire and water sticks rode rickety horses to clear the way, followed by a middle-aged matchmaker with a big smile and thick makeup. Behind them were more than 20 young women carrying simple bags and with adult faces. These women, mostly exposed to the elements year-round, had rough skin and sallow complexions, their faces revealing a fear and numbness towards their fate. The government gathered them up like commodities and distributed them to villages lacking men, for these destitute men with nowhere else to go to choose from. However, when my gaze swept across the line, I paused involuntarily. It was a girl. She wore the most tattered, almost unrecognizable coarse linen clothes in the room, with torn strips of fabric along the edges. But unlike the other village women around her, worn down by life's hardships, she possessed a breathtakingly beautiful face. Beneath her disheveled hair, her eyes were fair and delicate, without a single wound. Though her slender, clear eyes held intense fear and despair, they also shone with an indomitable spirit and vitality. "Hey everyone, take a good look!" A sharp, piercing voice broke the brief silence. The hunchback man grabbed my sleeve and whispered in my ear. "Scholar Shao, don't let that girl's pretty face fool you. Her name is Su Wan, and she's the inauspicious woman that everyone in Sijuan avoids like the plague." I raised an eyebrow and turned to look at him. "An ominous woman? How so?" The hunchbacked man swallowed hard, lowering his voice with a chilling unease. "In the great Han Dynasty, there are far more women than men. Many women, unable to afford the exorbitant single tax, participate in numerous marriage schemes but remain unmarried. But Su Wan is different. She's been through 4 marriage schemes since she was 16, and even at 18, no one dares to touch her. It's not that she can't work, but because she's suffered from a strange illness since childhood, she can't tolerate strong sunlight. If she's exposed to the scorching sun for even 3 days, her skin will become red, swollen, and covered in blisters. The superstitious old men in the village insist she's the reincarnation of a night demon from the mountains, bringing utter disaster to her husband's family. Ever since Brazil started paying double taxes on her when she was 16, the Su family's life has completely collapsed. Last year, her younger sister died suddenly from a serious illness, and the Brazilians unfairly blamed her for all the previous mistreatment, constantly beating and verbally abusing her. Her mean-spirited sister-in-law had already declared that if she couldn't get married this time, she could never return to her parents' home and would be sent directly to the county government office to be sold into servitude to pay off her debts. Pitiful as she was, who would dare marry a jinx who was always on the verge of disaster? After hearing this, I immediately understood. In this era where feudal superstition was deeply ingrained, even the most absurd phenomena could be demonized by ignorant villagers into deadly curses. The so-called night demon was nothing more than an extremely rare and severe case of photosensitivity. But in the eyes of these impoverished people who couldn't even afford basic necessities, it was a terrifying term. At this moment, the government officials began to read out the rules. According to the laws of the Han Dynasty, 4 people will step forward in turn to draw lots. Those who draw A, B, C, or D will choose their respective wives in turn. If anyone dares to disobey orders today, or refuses to take their wife after the selection is completed, they will be bound and sent to the army. Zhao San's triangular eyes darted around, and he was the first to rush forward, nonchalantly pulling out a slip of paper. The others were the hunchback and the lame man. When it was my turn, I took out the last bamboo stick from the wooden tube. A character was neatly carved on it, which meant that I was the last one to carve. The situation on the stone platform instantly became clear. The 3 men in front had already begun choosing from among the trembling women in the crowd. Zhao San, a man of despicable nature, had his eyes, filled with evil cultivation, scanning back and forth between several sturdy village women, cursing under his breath as he made his selection. The hunchback and the lame man each chose a man who, although pale and thin, seemed honest and hard-working. Only Su-Wan stood alone at the edge of the line, clutching the tattered hem of her clothes tightly, her knuckles bloodless from the strain. She watched helplessly as the others walked by. When Zhao San sauntered up to her, Su-Wan bit her lower lip, mustered the greatest courage she could muster, and tremblingly stepped forward, pleading in a low voice. "Brother! Although I'm a bit thin, I'm skilled in needlework and fabric making, and I eat very little. I'm willing to work like a slave, please choose me." Her voice was clear and melodious, yet it carried an undisguised sorrow and pleading. However, she was met with Zhao San's extremely vicious sneer and curses. "Pa! You jinx, you still have the nerve to come here? Who in the village doesn't know you're a vengeful monster who can't stand the sun? If I marry you, you'll bring ruin to my family before we even get married. Get out of here, don't dirty my hands." The constable standing nearby frowned and shouted sternly, "Silence! No pulling or shoving in front of the officers. What kind of behavior is this? Return to the ranks." Su-Wan staggered back, her thin body shivering in the cold wind. She slowly lowered her head, and finally crystal tears streamed down her pale face, landing on the cold yellow earth and kicking up a barely perceptible cloud of dust. The despair and helplessness that penetrated to the bone caused even the few others around her who seemed to share the same sentiment to turn away, unable to bear the sight. "All right. The last one, Xiao Ran of the Xiao family. Are you still dawdling? Hurry up and take the rest," the official in charge of registration urged impatiently. In sequence, at this moment, there was a beautiful woman who was regarded as a plague by her owner, and a widow over 40 years old, lame in one leg, with 2 children in tow. In the eyes of the owner, I, a penniless and down-on-my-luck scholar, had no choice but to marry that widow with children, and thus I barely managed to meet the government's marriage quota. I looked up, my gaze sweeping across the crowd and quickly landing on the girl whose face was streaked with tears and who had completely given up hope. In this cold, numb, and indifferent ancient world where human life is cheap, she and I are both marginalized individuals ruthlessly abandoned by the times and fate. The difference is that I have a system, while she only has a dead end. I felt no fear in my eyes. I stepped forward and, under the gazes of countless bewildered, dazed, and infatuated eyes, I raised my index finger and steadily pointed it at Su-Wan, who was standing in the far corner. "Big shot, I choose her." The sound wasn't loud, but it clearly reached the ears of everyone in the room. The entire venue fell into a deathly silence. Immediately afterwards, the crowd erupted in a deafening roar, as if a pot had been boiled over. "He's gone mad! This kid from the Xiao family has absolutely gone insane from hunger!" He'd rather leave behind that perfectly good widow and go after that nightshade girl who even the heavens wouldn't tolerate. Does he think he'll live long enough? Tsk, birds of a feather flock together, a penniless man and a jinx, a perfect match. On the stone platform, Suwon suddenly looked up, her face filled with shock as she stared at me. Her beautiful eyes were brimming with tears, yet they wouldn't fall. Instead, they were filled with immense shock, bewilderment, and an overwhelming sense of elation and disbelief, as if she had been given a second chance at life. The official in charge of registration was taken aback at first, then breathed a long sigh of relief. Every year, these assignments resulted in a few fiercely independent women who would rather die than comply, or even cause deaths, giving him a major headache. As long as someone was willing to take her away, he didn't care if she was a demon or a jinx. As long as he completed his task, he could return to his post. Good! Xiao Ran's choice of Suwon is in accordance with the marriage laws of the Han Dynasty, the official announced loudly. Where is the matchmaker? Quickly bring the marriage certificate! A smiling middle-aged matchmaker hurried forward and handed us a hastily prepared, red paper marriage certificate. Suwon and I each pressed our red handprints onto it. With the official's announcement, the ceremony is complete. Everyone, go home and live your lives. The marriage assignment process, intended to prevent depression and stagnation, finally came to an end. The officials and their errand boys rode off on horseback, and the onlookers dispersed, their discussions swirling around. But Zhao San from the star system, still unwilling to give up, approached, spat out a thick wad of phlegm, and sneered sarcastically. Xiao Ran, you've got guts! You've picked up the famous Nightshade head while scavenging for scraps. Just you wait, in less than 3 days, even your roof will be dented by this jinx. Don't be kneeling at the village entrance begging for rice gruel then. I turned around, gave him a cold look, and spoke calmly but with an undeniable sharpness. Zhao San, shut your filthy mouth. How am I supposed to live? You stray dog barking and howling here. If you dare say another word, I won't hesitate to cripple your other leg as well. I stared intently, then turned to look at Suwon, who stood to the side, looking uneasy yet filled with reverence. Let's go back to our home. I sighed, lowering my voice. Suwon followed closely behind me, walking back to the dilapidated blacksmith shop at the end of the village, its mud walls almost half collapsed. Along the way, the village gossip flew like knives from all directions. Suwon lowered her head further and further, a blush of shame rising on her fair neck. Her voice was as soft as a mask. I can't let you be made a laughingstock of yourself on your new marriage. I stopped and turned to look at her, saying seriously, Suwon, remember my words. People can talk all they want, let them gossip. From today onwards, you are my lawfully wedded wife, Xiao Ran. As long as I'm here, no one can bully you anymore, and no one can treat you like a jinx. Suwon's body trembled, tears blurring her vision again, and she nodded heavily. Pushing open the drafty wooden door, I stepped into this shabby home, almost bare of everything. Inside, besides a rusty iron pot, a musty, dilapidated wooden bed, and a drafty blacksmith's furnace, there was nothing else. But Suwon looked around and saw not the Vatican's disdain, but rather an air of peace and belonging on a mountaintop. She sniffed, rolled up her sleeves, and said, The house is too dirty. I'll go get some water and thoroughly clean it. You rest for a bit. Looking at her thin yet hard-working figure, my heart felt heavy. Looking around, Suwon couldn't find a single grain of rice in the house. Seeing this, she hesitated, then carefully pulled a small cloth bag wrapped in several layers of oilcloth from the pocket of her worn-out clothes. Inside, she found a small piece of silver and a mere 5 or 6 rusty copper coins. This was all the money her mother had secretly given her before she left home. It was her only source of support and confidence in the family. This is what my mother told me to shock you. We'll need it to buy rice at home. Suwon handed me the loose silver, a hint of shyness and unease appearing on her fair face. On our wedding night, I was shocked and ashamed to find myself having to use my bride's hidden savings to buy rice to make ends meet. This was a profound shock to someone like me, a former top scientist. I secretly vowed to make this unfortunate girl live the life that everyone in the village envied, to repay her doubly, and to honor my mother-in-law whom I had never even met. After absorbing all of the original owner's memories, I gained a clear understanding of the geography and culture of this world. It was a vast feudal empire called the Han Dynasty, which had been conquered for over 300 years. Although it had familiar geographical landmarks such as the Yangtze River, the Yellow River, and the Taihang Mountains, and its language and writing were highly similar to modern ones, the course of history had been almost completely changed. To buy the life-saving food, I need to trek more than 20 miles along rugged mountain roads to the nearest market town. Wait for me at home, don't go anywhere. I'm just going into town for a bit, I'll be right back, I instructed. Suwon nodded obediently. Okay, I'll clean the house and wait for you to come back. Having finished explaining, I tucked the broken piece of silver into my pocket, strode off, and headed quickly toward the town, braving the somewhat glaring midday sun. The 20-mile mountain road might be a difficult journey for an ordinary person, but fortunately, after binding with the system, I gained a comprehensive enhancement of my physical functions. My leg muscles were full of explosive power, and my originally heavy steps became light and steady. In just over an hour, the outline of the distant town had already appeared on the horizon. Shops lined both sides of the cobblestone street, the air filled with the aroma of meat from steamed bun shops and the bitter scent of herbs. I didn't linger and went straight to the largest grain shop in town. Shopkeeper, how much is a bushel of top-quality white flour? Do you accept loose silver? I slapped the loose silver I had been carrying on my chest onto the counter, making a crisp, muffled sound. The grain shopkeeper, who had initially glanced at my patched, coarse clothes, assuming I was just another beggar, instantly transformed his contempt into a fawning smile when he saw the decent-quality silver coin. Oh, please come in, sir! Top-quality white flour is 30 coins a dough, a unit of dry measure, and this silver coin is more than enough. It's not only enough to buy 2 dough of flour, but I can also throw in a few jin, a unit of weight, of coarse grains and beans. In this ancient era of low productivity, grain was the hardest currency. I didn't buy all refined white flour. Instead, I asked for a peck of white flour and a peck of brown rice, and used the remaining money to buy a small packet of salt and a few pieces of coarsely made candied fruit to satisfy my cravings. In an era when even salt was scarce in the home, these things were enough to give Suwon a real sense of security she had never felt before. By the time I rushed back to the blacksmith shop with my bags full, it was already getting dark. As I pushed open the courtyard gate, the scene before me startled me slightly. The once messy yard, piled high with scrap metal, was now neatly organized. The door of the dilapidated house was wide open, and a faint fragrance of mugwort wafted through the air. Suwon was squatting by the well washing a rag. Hearing the noise, she hurriedly straightened up, her delicate face flushed with a healthy blush from her labor. Seeing the 2 large bags of grain I was carrying, she exclaimed in surprise. You bought so much? How much money did this cost? It didn't cost much, just the necessities for our daily life. I put down the heavy bag of rice, and looking at the fine beads of sweat on her forehead, a warm feeling welled up in my heart. Are you tired? Come inside and rest for a while. I'll cook dinner tonight. Suwon quickly shook her head, her eyes glistening with tears of emotion, and said softly, I'm not tired. By the way, Xiaolang, I was thinking of going back to my parents' home tomorrow. My sister-in-law's family has an old and used loom. I'd like to borrow it and help weave some coarse cloth to sell at the market, which can help supplement our household income. Looking at the cautious anticipation in her eyes, I sighed inwardly. The original owner of this body knew perfectly well what kind of life Suwon had led in that patriarchal family, where she was treated with extreme cruelty. Rushing back to her parents' home to borrow things on the second day of her marriage was not only impolite, but would likely also subject her to the cold sarcasm and disdain of her mean-spirited sister-in-law. Don't go tomorrow. I stepped forward and interrupted her gently but firmly. In the first few days of a wedding, what kind of bride rushes back to her parents' home to borrow things? I'm here at home, and we have enough food to eat. I will never let you go hungry. We can talk about weaving in a few days. Suwon was slightly taken aback, but then felt a sense of security as the man protected her from behind. She obediently replied, "Whatever you say." Looking at the outdated, rusty iron furnace in the yard, riddled with impurities and made of scrap iron, I knew that simply forging ordinary farm tools wouldn't be enough to truly establish myself in this world. The iron ore smelting technology here was extremely primitive, producing a high level of impurities, resulting in ironware that was not only heavy but also easily broken. Fortunately, I possessed top-tier knowledge of modern materials science and mechanical engineering. If you want to live a good life in this world, you have to upgrade your tools of the trade first. I looked at the dilapidated furnace and already had a plan in mind. To forge iron, one must first overcome the hurdle of wind. The old leather bellows not only leaked air but also produced a weak draft, necessitating the repair of both the furnace and the bellows. However, this would take considerable time. Right now, the most pressing issue is securing enough food for everyone. The deep mountains teem with wild animals. My hunting experience with my grandfather from a past life remains, and coupled with my scientific and engineering mind, creating a hunting tool far superior to anything of this era shouldn't be difficult. Suwon, you can start a fire and cook at home. I'll borrow the tools from the yard for a bit. All afternoon, the blacksmith's shop was filled with the clanging and banging of metal. Using a few scraps of old hardwood, flexible tendons, and a few pieces of finely polished steel, I managed to produce a small but incredibly deadly portable crossbow before sunset, thanks to my superb modern crossbow-making skills. As evening fell, our first formal dinner as newlyweds was served. There were no celebratory guests, no elaborate formalities, only a wooden basin of steaming, thick wheat porridge, accompanied by a dish of coarse salt and a few freshly blanched wild vegetables. Although the bran in the porridge was coarse and hard to swallow, for Suwon, who usually relied on wild vegetables and thin porridge to survive and whose stomach was always empty, this was simply the most exquisite delicacy in the world. When Suwon picked up the earthenware bowl, she carefully scooped most of the broken rice grains and slightly thick porridge into my bowl, leaving only a thin layer of clear broth and a few wild vegetables for herself. She forced a smile and said, "I don't eat much at home, this is enough. You do physical labor outside every day, you need to eat more to nourish your body." Looking at her cautious, timid manner, as if afraid that even a single extra bite would displease her husband, I felt a sharp pang of sorrow, as if something had stabbed me. I put down my bowl, switched her bowl of porridge with mine, and said in a deep voice, "You are my wife, not here to be a servant girl. From now on, if I have any solid food in the house, you will never have any thin porridge. Finish it all, not a single grain of rice." Holding a full bowl of steaming rice porridge, Suwon could no longer hold back her tears, which streamed down her face. She had heard countless scoldings and sarcastic remarks in her life, but no one had ever used such a matter-of-fact, even commanding tone to force her to eat another bite of rice. As night fell, a dim oil lamp flickered in the drafty house. From outside, the sounds of mischievous children playing pranks and the dull thud of stones hitting the wooden wall could be heard from time to time. Considering the abrupt union of the two on their wedding night, coupled with the shock and unease Suwon experienced upon entering the house, I decided to let her get a good night's sleep tonight. I picked up a bundle of straw, intending to sleep in the cold blacksmith's shop next door. "Xiao Lang! Where are you going?" Suwon stood at the door, clutching the only patched coarse cloth blanket in the house, her eyes filled with fear and loss, her voice trembling as she asked, Is it that you also despise me for being a shameful night demon, and don't even want to stay in a room with me?" I stopped and turned to look at her tear-filled eyes, sighing inwardly. I walked up to her, gently wiping away the lingering tears from the corners of her eyes, and said softly, "What are you thinking? Our marriage was rushed. I just wanted to give you enough time to adjust. Besides, those gossipy people outside are watching our family. If I'm not here keeping an eye on things, who knows what those scoundrels will do to you? Just go to sleep peacefully. I'll be right next door, not going anywhere. Suwon stared at me blankly, the panic in her eyes slowly fading, replaced by an unyielding tenderness. She bit her lip, and without a word, shoved the blanket into my arms, stubbornly saying, "It's chilly at night, and the blacksmith's shop is drafty. You must cover yourself with this blanket. If you get sick, this family will fall apart completely." Seeing the genuine concern in her eyes, I felt a warmth in my heart, stopped refusing, nodded, and went back to my room to rest. The next morning, just as dawn was breaking, Suwon got up early and swept the yard spotlessly, even boiling warm water. Just as she was busy, there was a rapid knocking at the door. I pushed open the door and saw a woman standing outside, dressed in coarse cloth, whose face bore a resemblance to Suwon's but looked weathered. She was Suwon's cousin, whose family barely made ends meet with 2 disabled relatives. She was Suwon's closest relative, and the only elder who truly cared for her. "Little sister, come in quickly." Suwon greeted her with delight. My cousin was carrying a small bamboo basket, which was filled to the brim with fresh shepherd's purse and a handful of yams that she had just picked from the foot of the mountain. She smiled somewhat awkwardly and said, "Brother-in-law, Suwon, you got married yesterday. My family is so poor that we can't afford any decent wedding gifts. This basket of wild vegetables is something I just dug up from the back mountain before dawn this morning. They're clean and tender. I brought them to add some freshness to your wedding." In this famine year when even we couldn't feed ourselves, a basket of wild vegetables was an extremely generous gift. I quickly welcomed my cousin into the house and thanked her politely, saying, "Thank you so much, cousin. Please sit down and have some hot water." After seeing my cousin off, I picked up the portable crossbow I had just finished yesterday and carefully checked the tension of the bowstring and the slots for the steel arrowheads. After testing and adjusting it properly, I tucked the crossbow into my waistband and turned to Suwon, saying, "You stay home, I'm going into the back mountain. The villagers are always gossiping that we're starving, so today I'm bringing back some real stuff to show them." Having worked as a special equipment researcher in my previous life, I possess an almost instinctive intuition for tracking through mountains and forests, and surviving in the wild. Although the original owner was not good at blacksmithing, she was quite familiar with the terrain of the Taihang Mountains stretching for dozens of miles behind the village. As soon as I stepped into the forest, the rich fragrance of grass and trees wafted towards me. I tiptoed, using the trees as cover, and like a nimble cheetah, I ventured deep into the woods. Rustle! A faint, strange noise came from the bushes. My eyes narrowed, and my right hand flashed out of the simple crossbow at my waist. I cocked it, aimed, and pulled the trigger in one fluid motion. Whoosh! With a very faint whooshing sound, a steel arrowhead pierced the throat of a plump wild rabbit that was foraging in the grass, pinning it firmly to a tree trunk. Goodness, we've got a hit on the first shot. I stepped forward, pulled out the rabbit, and weighed it in my hand. It was at least 4 or 5 pounds. With the first one, the subsequent hunts became a one-sided, overwhelming victory. Thanks to the precise predictions based on modern aerodynamics and biological habits, in less than 2 hours, I had 2 plump wild rabbits hanging from my waist, each with glossy fur and a robust build. On the way back, we ran into a few village women picking wild vegetables at the foot of the mountain, carrying bamboo baskets. One of them, Auntie San, who was always gossiping, glanced at the heavy load of prey in my hands and sneered sarcastically. "Oh! Isn't this the young man from the Shao family who just got married? What's wrong? Can't stay at home, so you've come to the mountains to pretend to be something you're not? Don't end up not even getting a single rabbit hair, and instead letting the wolves snatch it away." Several women around also joined in with disdainful sneers. I didn't even bother to lift my eyelids. I waved the still dripping rabbit in my hand and retorted in a flat tone. "Instead of worrying about whether I can hunt a rabbit, Auntie, you should go back and check your leaky stove. At least I'll have some meat in my pot tonight." My aunt's face turned red and white as she choked on her words. She pointed at my nose, about to throw a tantrum, but I had already strode away. When Suwon saw me carrying 2 lively wild rabbits back home, she covered her mouth in surprise, her eyes instantly reddening. You really caught some prey? This is unbelievable. At night, Suwon skinned and gutted the wild rabbit, then simmered it in a large pot of fragrant rabbit soup with coarse salt and wild scallions. The room was filled with the rich aroma of the broth under the dim candlelight. Just as the two were about to start eating, they heard a series of hurried footsteps and the sound of stones hitting the wall outside. "Open the door! Xiao Ran, you coward, get out here!" Suddenly, a vulgar and arrogant roar came from outside the door. I frowned, pushed open the door, and saw Zhao San, the scoundrel who had been humiliated yesterday, holding a thick wooden stick, blocking the gate with 2 idle thugs. "Zhao San! What are you doing here?" My eyes turned cold as I stepped out the door. Zhao San's eyes gleamed with greed and malice as he pointed at me and shouted, "What are you doing? Xiao Ran, don't think you can act like a tyrant in this village just because you married a wife. Your father owed me 10 caddies of top-quality wheat before he died, and today is the day to pay the debt. Hurry up and hand over the grain in your house and the wild rabbit you just hunted to pay off the debt, or I'll smash up your lousy blacksmith shop today." Hearing the commotion, the villagers who had been watching all peeked out from their houses to see what was happening. Seeing the large crowd, Zhao San became even more emboldened, even casting a lewd glance at Suwon, who was peeking out from the courtyard, and uttering vulgarities. "Oh, little lady, you're quite beautiful, but unfortunately, you're an untouchable vixen. How about this, you have this poor wretch divorce you and come with me, I guarantee you'll eat white flour every day." Court death! My anger flared instantly. In my past life, I had won the city-level boxing championship during university, and had also trained in real combat with top-notch instructors at a special forces base for 2 years. When dealing with these thugs, words are never as effective as fists. Before Zhao San could finish speaking, I suddenly exerted force with my feet, and my whole body rushed out like a cheetah ready to pounce. Bang! A powerful straight punch, accompanied by a whistling sound, landed squarely on Zhao San's face. With a crisp cracking sound, Zhao San didn't even have time to scream before blood gushed from his nose, and he slammed heavily onto the stone steps behind him like a bundle of rotten straw. Seeing this, the other 2 thugs were about to pounce with their sticks when I kicked one of them in the stomach. He immediately collapsed to his knees in pain, clutching his stomach and curling up like a boiled shrimp. The last thug, seeing my sharp, piercing gaze, was so frightened that his legs went weak, and he dropped his stick and ran for his life. "Zhao San, open your dog eyes and see clearly." I stepped on Zhao San's chest, looking down at him condescendingly, my tone icy and piercing. "You know better than anyone whether my father owed you wheat. If you dare to come to my door again and cause trouble and swear, next time it won't be your nose that gets crippled, but your hands and feet. Get out!" Zhao San, clutching his bleeding nose, his eyes filled with fear and resentment, scrambled to his feet and fled, not forgetting to hurl a vicious threat before leaving. "Xiao Ran! You just wait! This isn't over!" When the villagers who were watching saw how easily I had dealt with Zhao San, who usually acted like a bully, they were immediately taken aback and looked at me with more awe. No one dared to say anything sarcastic to my face anymore. After this incident, the atmosphere in the room was somewhat heavy. Suwon brought warm water to wipe the dust off my hands, her delicate brows furrowed, and she advised with a worried expression. "Xiao Lang, you beat Zhao San so badly today, and he has several cronies behind him. He'll definitely come back for revenge later. How about you take another wife? It would be best to marry a woman from a prominent family with many brothers, so that you can use her family's influence to keep those bullies in check in the village." Hearing this, I was both amused and exasperated. I reached out and gently stroked the tip of her pert nose. "What nonsense are you thinking? Suwan alone has already given me so much trouble. You want to take a concubine? Don't worry, in this world, might makes right. It's better to rely on yourself than on anyone else. Suwan blushed at my intimate gesture, lowered her head, and shyly twisted the hem of her clothes, no longer speaking. However, the peaceful days did not last long. 2 days later, at dawn, I once again took my homemade crossbow and went into the mountains alone. The forest seemed extremely unusual today. The usually alert and wary rabbits and pheasants were running away in groups, and even a few muntjac, which were rarely seen, darted past me in a panic. I stopped abruptly, gripped the crossbow tightly, and a cold sweat instantly broke out on my back. There is only one explanation for the large-scale, abnormal exodus of animals. Some extremely terrifying apex predator is driving them away deep in the mountains. It is very likely the tyrant of the mountains and forests, a tiger. Tiger attacks on people have been a frequent occurrence in the area. Although the government has offered rewards for tiger hunting for many years, the vast majority of experienced professional hunters who go into the mountains never return. No, something must have happened deep in these mountains. I looked around, my brow furrowed. On my way back down the mountain, I ran into several village women picking wild vegetables, including Suwan's cousin. I quickly walked up to them and warned in a stern voice. Aunties and sisters-in-law, there are large wild animals roaming in the deep mountains today. Don't go any further in. Go down the mountain and go home right now. However, the village women looked at each other in bewilderment. One of them, who was usually fond of taking advantage of others, curled her lip and said with a sarcastic smile, "Chao Ran, you wouldn't happen to have hunted the prey yourself and want to seal off this forest so you can keep all the treasures on the mountain for yourself, would you? What kind of wild beast are you making up to scare who you're trying to frighten?" The others joined in the laughter, and no one took my warning seriously. I sighed helplessly, knowing full well that in this ignorant environment, words alone could not gain people's trust, so I could only hurry home. At home, Suwan was serving the freshly stewed pheasant into an earthenware bowl. Hearing my analysis, she turned deathly pale, grabbed my arm tightly, and pleaded in a trembling voice. "Since there are tigers in the mountains, please don't go there again. Promise me, okay?" I nodded, about to comfort her, when I suddenly remembered that my cousin had taken her family to gather herbs in a remote part of the mountains behind the village that day. The breadwinner of my cousin's family is disabled, and the whole family relies on these mountain produce and wild vegetables to survive. She often goes into the deep mountains alone. "No, my cousin is still in the back mountain." My expression changed, and I grabbed the crossbow and the gleaming machete from the corner of the wall. "It's getting dark soon. If the tiger really comes down the mountain, my cousin and the others are in grave danger." Although Suwan was worried, she knew that her cousin had always treated her very well, so she gritted her teeth and didn't stop me. She just said with red eyes, "Then you must come back safe and sound." I turned and rushed out of the blacksmith's shop, striding towards the back mountain. But Auntie San happened to be passing by and witnessed this scene. Immediately, as if she had seized upon some huge incriminating evidence, she loudly proclaimed throughout the village, "Come and see! That brat from the Shao family just returned from the deep mountains, and now he's running towards the back mountain with a knife. He clearly pocketed the mountain's treasure, and is trying to silence everyone and hide it." In an instant, the villagers' desires, already fueled by greed and curiosity, were completely ignited. Many strong young men shouted and grabbed their weapons, rushing in groups toward the back mountain, demanding an explanation from me and a share of the spoils. In the dense forest behind the mountain, dusk quickly descended like a tide, and all around was deathly silent, with a suffocating smell of blood filling the air. "Cousin! Brother Zhang!" I called out urgently in a low voice. A flurry of voices came from the bushes not far away. "Chao Ran? We're here!" I walked over quickly and saw my cousin and several women from the same village squatting under a tree, shivering, with freshly picked herbs scattered around them. "It's dangerous here! Wild animals are coming down the mountain!" Come down with me right now! I grabbed my cousin's arm. Before we could even take a step, dozens of torches suddenly lit up in the bushes around us, and accompanied by the sound of hurried footsteps, the village chief led a dozen villagers to surround us. Xiao Ran! Explain yourself! Third Aunt was the first to jump out, pointing her finger at my nose and cursing. What right do you have to monopolize the back mountain? Don't even think about leaving today if you don't hand over the treasures in the mountain. The village chief frowned and said in a deep voice. Xiao Ran, it's good that young people know how to make a living, but they can't be selfish. You say there are wild beasts in the mountains, do you have any evidence? If you can't produce any real evidence, don't try to spread rumors and disturb the whole village. I looked at these villagers, their eyes blinded by greed, and felt speechless. Just as I was about to explain, suddenly, the treetops in the distance began to shake violently. Roar! A deafening roar, like a muffled thunderclap, shattered the evening silence. The earth-shattering tiger's roar was like a bucket of ice water, instantly extinguishing all the greed and clamor on the villagers' faces. The torchlight flickered violently, and then, from the depths of the dense forest to the left, came a chilling sound of snapping branches. A massive tiger, as large as a small mountain, crashed through the bushes and charged out in a frenzy. Its fur was covered in blood, and several gruesome claw marks ran along its back, clearly indicating that it had been severely injured in the mountains, and was on the verge of death in a rage. A tiger! It's a fierce tiger! The village chief was so frightened that his legs went weak, and the torch in his hand fell to the ground with a thud. The villagers who had initially surrounded him with great momentum turned pale and trembled. They no longer cared about attacking or demanding an explanation, and screamed as they turned to flee for their lives. Don't run around! The faster you run, the faster you'll die! I shouted fiercely, and the system enhancement within my body was instantly activated. My eyes were fixed on that ferocious behemoth. The tiger weighed over 500 pounds, its large, bell-shaped eyes gleaming with a bloodthirsty ferocity. It roared, its target fixed on Brother Zhang, who was lagging behind the group and unable to move easily due to his leg disability. Brother Zhang fell to the ground, his face ashen with fear, and closed his eyes in despair. In that critical moment, I did not flinch. The distance of over 20 meters was crystal clear under my enhanced dynamic vision. I stepped forward, raised the portable crossbow in my hand, focused my energy, and pulled the trigger. Whoosh! The sound of something cutting through the air was sharp and piercing. The first steel arrow shot out like lightning, piercing the tiger's left foreleg with perfect accuracy. Roar! The tiger was in pain, its massive body staggered, and its momentum in the forward charge suddenly decreased. The second arrow followed immediately, hurtling straight towards its left hind leg with the force of a whirlwind, instantly stripping it of most of its mobility. You beast, get down on your knees! My eyes flashed with cold light. Just as the tiger was about to pounce on Brother Zhang, the third heavy steel arrow, which had been charged up for a long time, whistled out and hit the tiger's head right between the eyebrows. Boom! The behemoth, weighing over 500 pounds, let out a mournful howl, its massive body propelled forward a few steps by inertia, before crashing heavily onto the yellow earth, raising a cloud of dust. It twitched a few times before finally dying. A deathly silence enveloped the entire back mountain. Dozens of villagers stared in disbelief at the scene before them, their minds blank. They hadn't even seen how I made my move, and the forest tyrant that struck fear into the hearts of the entire village was already dead. It's alive? The tiger is dead? Brother Zhang trembled as he got up from the ground, looking at the enormous creature in front of him, tears welling up in his eyes. Immediately afterward, Brother Shang's elderly mother and the women of his family knelt down before me with a thud, kowtowing heavily and crying out, "My benefactor! If it weren't for your help, our whole family would be in the tiger's den today. This is an immense act of kindness that saved our lives." I quickly went over and helped them up. The surrounding villagers snapped out of their daze, and their gazes towards me completely changed. My third aunt, who had been the loudest earlier, was now filled with shame, wishing she could disappear into the ground. She awkwardly stepped forward and apologized. Xiao Ran. I was blind before, believing those rumors. Please don't hold it against me. The village chief stepped forward, trembling with excitement, and patted my shoulder heavily. Good young man. You are truly our village's savior and a great hero. The people of this village are mostly unfortunate souls who fled here to escape war, and they have suffered much humiliation at the hands of powerful clans from other villages. Now, a hero has emerged in the village who can kill a tiger with a skillful crossbow. From then on, no one within dozens of miles dared to easily provoke this small village. When I and the villagers worked together to carry the carcass of the tiger, which weighed over 500 pounds, back to the village entrance, the whole village instantly erupted in excitement. Every household lit torches, and men, women, and children all flocked over. The firelight illuminated the night as if it were daytime, and all eyes were fixed on me. The contempt and indifference of the past were gone from their gazes. Instead, they were replaced by naked awe and worship. My God! It really is a tiger. Its size is as big as a small mountain. Xiao Ran is truly amazing. He managed to kill a man-eating beast with just the crossbow he always carried with him. It's like a god descending to earth. The third aunt, who had been the loudest earlier, now had a fawning smile on her face. She squeezed to the front of the crowd, holding a bowl of steaming rice soup in her hand, and tremblingly handed it to me. Xiao Ran. No, Xiao Hero. I was just being nosy and said some nonsense earlier. Please be magnanimous and don't take it to heart. This bowl of hot soup will warm you up. I gave him a cold glance, didn't take the bowl of soup, and calmly said, Auntie, you're too kind. The mountains and forests are dangerous. In the future, it's better to watch what you eat than anything else. Auntie withdrew her hand sheepishly, her face turning pale and then red with embarrassment, but she didn't dare to utter a single word of dissent. The village chief, leaning on his cane, strode forward, his hands trembling with excitement. He looked around and raised his voice to the entire village. Fellow villagers, we all fled our homes to this place, and we've suffered a lot of bullying from those powerful clans in other villages, who treated us like pushovers. But today, our village has produced a hero like Xiao Ran. From now on, if anyone dares to bully anyone from our village again, they'll have to ask us if we'll allow it. Yes. If anyone dares to bully our village in the future, we'll fight them to the death. The villagers were filled with excitement, and their cheers echoed through the night sky. In this chaotic world where the strong prey on the weak, might and strength are the greatest principles. With a thrilling tiger hunt, I firmly established myself in this village and won unparalleled dignity for Su Wan and me. Surrounded by crowds and filled with admiration, I returned home with my tiger hunting spoils. The courtyard gate creaked open, and Su Wan stood in the yard, holding a dim oil lamp. She clearly knew what had happened on the back mountain. Her face was deathly pale, and her hands were tightly clutching the hem of her clothes. When she saw me walk into the yard unharmed, she could no longer hold back her tears and rushed into my arms. You scared me to death. I heard them say the tiger came down the mountain. I thought you would never come back. Su Wan buried her head in my chest, sobbing uncontrollably. I gently patted her back and said softly, Silly girl, I promised to protect you. How could a mere beast possibly keep me here? That night, the whole village was immersed in the joy of the tiger hunt, while in my room with Su Wan, the candlelight flickered, and two hearts that had endured so much hardship finally came together. In this cold and cruel ancient world, we became each other's only salvation. The next morning, sunlight streamed into the dilapidated courtyard. Because I had hunted a tiger, the government quickly sent people to investigate. They not only exempted me from all taxes for the year, but also gave me a reward of 5 taels of silver and a high-ranking government commendation. This amount of money was a huge sum for us, who had once been so poor that we couldn't even afford to eat. I brought Su Wan to town and used the reward money to buy a lot of rice, flour, and cooking oil. I even bought Su-won several bolts of fine cotton cloth so she could make some decent new clothes. When Su-won came out of the house wearing a brand new sky blue cotton dress, I was slightly taken aback. Her already pretty face looked even more stunning against the backdrop of the new clothes. Although she suffered from a strange allergy to sunlight, in my eyes she was the most beautiful wife in the world. Xiao Lang, this dress is too expensive. How can I wear such fine material? Su-won nervously tugged at the hem of her dress, her cheeks flushed. You are my wife, and you should dress even better from now on. I smiled and ruffled her hair. Days passed, and with the mechanical blueprints provided by the system and my modern, exquisite craftsmanship, I began to renovate the blacksmith shop. I redesigned and built a highly efficient double-acting piston bellows and improved the refractory material structure of the furnace. The iron ore, originally riddled with impurities, was transformed in my hands through precise smelting into high-grade agricultural tools and hunting knives that were tough and could cut through iron like mud. Before long, villagers from dozens of miles around came to me with their scrap iron, asking me to forge farm tools. The reputation of Zhao's blacksmith shop spread far and wide, and our lives gradually improved from barely making ends meet to becoming prosperous and well off. Su-won's smile grew wider and wider. Her former inferiority and timidity had completely disappeared, replaced by confidence and composure. As the sun sets, wisps of smoke rise from the chimneys. I sit in the yard polishing my newly sharpened steel hunting knife, while Su-won hums a country tune softly beside me, skillfully spinning cotton yarn. In this turbulent and war-torn Han dynasty, armed with a system and modern knowledge, I not only survived but thrived. Our legend has only just begun. The blacksmith's reputation spread far and wide with each batch of high-quality ironware produced. Merchants and snobbish clerks from other villages who used to look down on us would now instinctively slow down when they reached our blacksmith shop, and greet us with fawning smiles and clasped hands from afar. Before the morning mist had completely dissipated, a long queue had already formed outside the courtyard gate. Master Xiao, could you take a look at this hoe of mine? I accidentally smashed it against a rock in the field last time, and it got a big chip in. Do you think it can be reforged? As long as you're willing to put in the effort, the wages are negotiable. I just had a fat hen at home, and I'll have my son bring it over later. A man from a neighboring village handed over the broken farm tool with a beaming smile, his eyes full of flattery. I wiped the sweat from my forehead, took the hoe, weighed it in my hand, and casually tossed it into the scrap metal pile beside me. I said indifferently, "The chip is too big. Even if you manage to repair it, it won't last long. How about this? I'll forge you a new high-carbon steel shovel head this afternoon. It won't chip, and it won't dull even after 3 years." Upon hearing this, the man was overjoyed and bowed repeatedly, saying, "Oh, thank you so much, Master Xiao. You're so kind." I am no longer the impoverished scholar who couldn't even afford a bowl of porridge. Thanks to the metallurgical formulas in the system's database, hundreds of years ahead of their time, I've increased the purity of the originally crude and inferior molten iron several times over. In this era where even forging a decent weapon is a matter of luck, the ironware I produce has become a highly sought-after commodity. As I was busy working, I heard light footsteps coming from inside the house. Su-won came out carrying a basin of warm water. Seeing that the courtyard was crowded with people, she skillfully took a clean coarse towel and handed it to me, saying softly, "Xiao Lang, rest for a while and have some hot tea to soothe your throat. You haven't even had a sip of water since dawn." I took the towel and wiped the grime off my hands. Looking at her face, which was even whiter and rosier from being moisturized, I smiled and nodded. "Okay, I'll listen to you." Seeing this, the villagers queuing around joked, "Master Xiao is so lucky. He married such a beautiful and capable wife from the Su family. She manages the household perfectly, inside and out. It's truly enviable." Su-won blushed crimson at the praise, gave me a shy glare, and then turned back to her work inside. Since the tiger hunt, no one in the village dared to treat her as some kind of nightmare, anymore. On the contrary, when people mentioned Suwon now, their words were full of respect and envy. As evening fell, after seeing off the last group of customers, the blacksmith shop finally quieted down. I sat on the stone bench in the courtyard, watching the numbers slowly fluctuate on the system panel. Ding! Current reputation points, 3200. Smelting technology proficiency, Master, unlocks intermediate alloy steel forging process. As my reputation points accumulate, the system's functionality gradually expands. It not only unlocks more advanced metal smelting blueprints but also includes the manufacturing principles of some modern basic mechanical transmission devices. In this era where cold weapons and feudal imperial power intertwine, these technologies are undoubtedly my greatest source of confidence for survival and even for future conquest of the world. After dinner, Suwon sat under the lamp, carefully sewing shoe soles. The dim light of the oil lamp shone on her focused profile, making her appear exceptionally gentle and serene. Xiao Lang. Suwon stopped what she was doing, looked up at me, her eyes filled with a hint of seriousness. Today, Manager Wang from the town sent someone to say that a wealthy merchant in the county town has taken a liking to the fine steel hunting knives that our shop makes, and is willing to pay a high price to buy them long term. He even wants to invite you to personally open a larger workshop in the county town. I raised an eyebrow and sneered. A wealthy merchant from the county town? Unsolicited favors are either suspicious or thieves. In this chaotic world, without government support and powerful backing, blindly opening a shop in the city is like throwing lambs to the slaughter. Tell him that the blacksmith shop operates on a small scale, doesn't take large orders, and won't travel far. Seeing that I was thoughtful, Suwon finally felt relieved and nodded gently, saying, I'll listen to you. As long as we can live a peaceful life together, anywhere is fine. However, the saying, the taller the tree, the more the wind will blow, applies to any world. Just as we were enjoying a rare period of peace, an even greater storm was quietly brewing in the power vortex of the county. The storm came sooner than expected. 3 days later, one afternoon, as I was intently hammering a piece of scorching steel in front of the furnace, a rapid and chaotic sound of hooves suddenly came from the village entrance in the distance. Immediately afterwards, several government horses clad in leather armor charged into the village, kicking up a cloud of mud and gravel. Leading the group was a middle-aged man dressed in the uniform of a county constable, with a standard long knife hanging at his waist. He had a face full of scars and a sinister look in his eyes. Behind him were several local constables who were all obsequious and bowing. Among them was none other than Zhao San, the rogue I had just given a good beating a few days ago. Zhao San pointed in the direction of my blacksmith shop and shouted shrilly, Sir! It's this kid! Not only did he commit violence and beat up innocent people in the street, but he also secretly hid prohibited ironware. He might be a vagrant spy. The head constable snorted coldly and waved his hand. Surround this lousy blacksmith shop for me! A dozen or so fierce-looking bailiffs rushed into the courtyard and surrounded Suwon and me. Suwon was terrified, her face turning pale. She smashed the basin of water in her hand on the ground with a clatter, but she still forced herself to stand in front of me, suppressing her fear. I dusted off my hands, straightened up calmly, and looked coldly at the constable. I am a law-abiding citizen who pays my taxes on time. I don't know which law I have violated that would trouble the county constable to personally bring people to my door? The head constable squinted at me, his nostrils flaring as he sneered. Upholding the law? Someone reported you for illegally smelting military-grade steel. You're up to no good. Besides, you're suspected of violently resisting arrest and seriously injuring fellow villagers. Men, lock this madman up and take him away. Several constables rushed forward with sinister smiles, brandishing heavy steel shackles in their hands. My eyes flashed coldly, and my right hand stealthily reached for the portable hunting knife at my waist. In this dog-eat-dog world, reasoning with greedy and corrupt officials is like casting pearls before swine. Just as I was about to teach these ignorant fools a lesson they would never forget, a hoarse, angry shout suddenly rang out from the village entrance. Stop! I'd like to see who dares to arrest someone right under the old man's nose. The village chief, leaning on his cane, was followed by 100 villagers carrying hoes and carrying poles, who glared angrily and surrounded the courtyard. After the tiger hunt, the whole village regarded me as their leader. Anyone who dared to touch me was going against the entire village. The constable's expression changed slightly as he looked at the sea of villagers, a hint of fear flashing in his eyes. Seeing this, Zhao San urged from the side, "Sir, these unruly people are planning a rebellion. Don't hold back." I coldly interrupted him, pulled out the commendation order issued by the government for the last tiger hunt from my pocket, and held it high. "Sir, look carefully, this is a commendation order personally stamped by the county magistrate. I shall kill the tiger and protected the village with honor, and I am a meritorious official of the court. If you dare to arrest me today without any evidence, believe me, I will go directly to the prefectural city to beat the drum and appeal for justice, and accuse you of framing a meritorious official and disturbing the local area." The head constable stared at the official document stamped with the official seal, a cold sweat beading on his forehead. He had only come here to extort money and vent his anger, having been bribed by Zhao San and a wealthy merchant in the county, but he hadn't expected to run into such a formidable opponent. After weighing the pros and cons, the head constable glared at Zhao San and sneered, "You little rascal, you're ruthless. This isn't over, let's go." The whole village erupted in cheers as the officials fled in disarray. I turned around, pulled the still shaken Suwon into my arms, and gazed intently towards the county town. After this incident, I became sworn enemies with the county government. As night fell, the oil lamp flickered dimly. Suwon sat beside me, her hands still mending clothes, but the stitches were somewhat messy. Her delicate brows were slightly furrowed, clearly filled with deep worry. "Xiao Lang, although you scared off that constable today with your commendation order, people in officialdom are the most vengeful. It's easy to dodge a spear in the open, but hard to guard against an arrow in the dark. Why don't we leave here? Let's settle down in another county. It's better than living in fear every day." I put down the steel hunting knife I was wiping, took her cold little hand in my warm palm, shook my head, and said firmly, "Escape? Where can we escape to? This Han dynasty may be vast, but it's full of refugees and war. Without a household registration or travel permit, we won't even have a place to stay elsewhere, and will be more vulnerable to being bullied. Besides, why should we hand over our hard-earned blacksmith shop and this hard-won peaceful life to those corrupt officials?" Suwon raised her head, meeting my calm and confident gaze, and the panic in her heart inexplicably subsided. She nodded gently. "As long as I'm with you, I'll listen to you even if it's a mountain of knives or a sea of fire." The next morning, just as the sun peeked over the ridge of the Taihang Mountains, an unexpected guest arrived at the blacksmith's shop. The newcomer was none other than the village chief who had led the crowd to watch the tiger a few days earlier, and was nearly scared out of his wits by it. He was leaning on his old, blackened wooden cane, followed by several village elders, and walked into the courtyard with a solemn expression. "Village chief, what brings you here today?" I put down the hammer in my hand, went up to him, and politely poured him a bowl of hot water. The village chief sighed, took the teacup but didn't drink it, instead shaking his head with a bitter expression. "Xiao Ran, you're a smart man, let's not beat around the bush. Yesterday, although the county constable slunk away, he spread the word in town before he left, saying that you disrespect your superiors and resist your duties, and ordered you to personally bring the tiger hunting reward to the county government within 3 days to plead guilty, or else he would send a large army to raze our entire village to the ground." The atmosphere in the courtyard froze instantly upon hearing this. The villagers who had been eavesdropping under the eaves turned pale and began to whisper among themselves. I sneered, picked up my teacup and took a sip. "The county government has quite the arrogance. Trying to get something for nothing without any evidence. Don't worry, village chief, this trouble was caused by me, Xiao Ran. I'll take responsibility for my actions and won't implicate the villagers." Upon hearing this, the village chief stamped his feet in exasperation, pounding the ground heavily with his cane. What nonsense are you spouting, child? Ever since you shot and killed the tiger, saving the lives of our entire village, you have been our benefactor and pillar of Zaijiawan. Those corrupt officials clearly coveted your blacksmithing skills and the reward money from last time, and wanted to wipe us out. Although we are outsiders, we are not pushovers to be slaughtered. Hearing this, a warm feeling welled up in my heart. In this cold and snobbish feudal ancient world, to hear such words shows that these simple and honest villagers are not entirely beyond redemption. The village chief is right. At worst, we'll fight those corrupt officials to the death. Several strong young men outside the courtyard also gathered around, carrying machetes, all of them full of enthusiasm. I waved my hand to signal everyone to quiet down and said in a deep voice, "A direct confrontation is the worst strategy. The weapons in the hands of the government are not just for show. If a civil uprising really breaks out, we will be the ones who suffer. However, if they want to control me, Xiao Ran, they should think twice before they try to bite me." With the help of the advanced technology database in my mind and the exquisite mechanical knowledge I learned in the Modern Industrial Research Institute in my previous life, a meticulous plan to overcome the strong with the weak and completely eliminate future troubles has quickly taken shape in my mind. For the next 2 days, the blacksmith shop in Zaijiawan remained completely closed to customers. No matter how much people knocked and inquired outside, there was no sound from the courtyard except for the dense clanging of metal. Although Su-Wan was very anxious and full of worry, seeing me calmly and methodically assembling those strange steel parts, she gritted her teeth and suppressed all her fear, wholeheartedly helping me by burning charcoal and handing me tools. On the evening of the 3rd day, the setting sun was like blood, dyeing the outline of the Taihang Mountains a scarlet red. Outside the county government gate, several tall horses kicked up clouds of dust. The middle-aged constable leading the group, along with more than 20 constables dressed in black uniforms and wielding knives and clubs, stormed up to the entrance of Zaijiawan village. Zhao San followed behind the horses like a lapdog, leading the way with a fawning expression. "Where's that arrogant, ignorant wretch Xiao Ran? Get out here right now!" The constable dismounted, kicked open the dilapidated wooden door, and led his men into the courtyard. The courtyard was deserted, except for a few wooden boxes covered with black cloth neatly arranged on the stone platform in the center, and a strangely shaped, coldly gleaming heavy steel crossbow. The head constable was slightly taken aback, then grinned maliciously. "Oh? This kid's got some sense, knowing to prepare the things beforehand. Men, take the box away, search the place again, and throw this madman in jail." Just as the constables lunged at the wooden crate with sneers, I slowly emerged from the shadows of the eaves, toying with a gleaming steel dagger in my hand, my tone calm and undisturbed. "No need to search, I'm here." The constable sized me up, a glint of greed and ruthlessness flashing in his eyes. "Xiao Ran, you resisted being summoned, a crime punishable by double. But for the sake of these gifts, if you kneel down and kowtow 3 times to Zhao San, and hand over the blueprints for these exquisite crossbows, I, the constable, may spare your life." Zhao San, gloating from the side, shouted, "Did you hear that? Xiao Ran, kneel down and kowtow right now, or you'll be begging for death today." I sneered, and instead of kneeling down, I slowly raised my right hand and snapped my fingers crisply. "Sorry, I've broken your plan." As soon as he finished speaking, more than a dozen dazzling torches suddenly lit up on the rooftops and in the shadows. The village chief, along with dozens of strong villagers, instantly surged onto the wall, each holding a simple repeating crossbow that I had been working on for days, the dark arrowheads all aimed at the constables in the courtyard. The constable's face changed drastically, and he shouted sternly, "You bunch of unruly people, do you want to rebel? If you dare to attack and kill government officials, I will exterminate your entire clan." "Rebellion?" I scoffed, brandishing the dagger in my hand. "Open your dog eyes and see clearly who's sending whom to their doom." I suddenly activated a hidden mechanism at my feet. With a sharp crack, the ground in the center of the courtyard suddenly split open, and several carefully designed mechanical tripwires tightened instantly. Before the officers at the front could react, Their legs were tightly bound by several strong cowhide tripwires, leaving them hanging upside down from the roof beams. Immediately afterwards, dozens of fine steel short arrows whistled past, striking the ground with pinpoint accuracy at the feet of the constables. The arrows buzzed, sending the usually domineering constables shivering with fear. The constable, terrified, drew his sword and roared, his voice trembling with fear. "Insolence! You dare touch a hair on my head!" I darted forward, my figure moving like a ghost through the crowd. Before he could swing his knife, I delivered a powerful punch to his chest, then grabbed his wrist and twisted it. Snap! With a sharp scream of bone cracking, the constable's long sword clattered to the ground, and I pinned him firmly under my foot. "Sir, who is begging whom here?" I looked down at him, my eyes as cold as knives. The courtyard was deathly silent, save for the constable's painful groans echoing in the wind. Those yamen runners who usually swaggered around, extorting and demanding bribes, now held their knives and clubs, but their legs went weak, and they didn't dare breathe. They looked at me in terror, as if I were a monster. On the surrounding walls, the village's strong men, each holding a gleaming repeating crossbow, looked down at them, their shared hatred and murderous aura completely intimidating these usually cowardly yamen runners. "Hero Shao! Hero Shao, spare my life! It's a misunderstanding, it's all a misunderstanding!" Seeing the situation was bad, Zhao San's legs went weak, and he knelt down on the ground with a thud. Snot and tears streamed down his face as he frantically called out to me, begging for mercy. It's the constable who took bribes from the wealthy merchants in the county and forced us to frame you. It has nothing to do with me, Brother Shao, please spare my dog's life." The constable, pinned under my foot, was writhing in pain, yet he still roared defiantly. "Shao Ran! You dare to assault an official of the imperial court! This is treason! The magistrate will never let you get away with this! The imperial army will raze your entire village to the ground!" "Shut up!" I pressed down slightly with my feet, and the excruciating pain of my broken ribs made the constable scream, forcing him to swallow the harsh words that followed. I looked down at him coldly, my tone completely flat. "Treason? What a huge accusation, sir! I, Shao Ran, have been law-abiding and paid my taxes. My tiger hunting and village protection were commended by the imperial court. But you, as public officials of the county government, have knowingly broken the law, colluding with local thugs to extort money and frame innocent people. How should this be accounted for?" Cold sweat poured down the constable's forehead, and fear finally showed in his eyes. He had originally thought this was just a down-on-his-luck poor man who could be easily manipulated, but he never expected that the other party was not only terrifyingly skilled, but also possessed such formidable defensive weapons, and even had the situation completely under his control. "What do you want?" the constable asked through gritted teeth, his voice trembling. I glanced around, my gaze sweeping across the terrified faces of each constable, then said in a deep voice, "It's simple. First, write a confession and sign it, clearly admitting your crimes of colluding with Zhao San and plotting something sinister today. Second, Zhao San's usual bullying and provocations in the village will be dealt with by the village chief and villagers according to village rules. As for you—" I paused, then patted the constable's face condescendingly. "Take your men and get back to the county town. Tell that wealthy merchant and the magistrate who orchestrated this that I, Shao Ran, will fight them to the end. If they dare to cause trouble in Zaijiwan again, next time it won't be clerks sent to the county government, but your heads." The constable trembled all over, not daring to utter a single word of refusal, and nodded repeatedly like a pestle pounding garlic. "I'll write it! I'll write it! Hero, spare my life! As long as you spare my dog's life, I'll do anything you ask." Seeing that all was lost, Zhao San, who was trembling with fear, tried to escape, but the village chief and several strong men rushed up to him and tied him up tightly with thick hemp ropes. "Good! That was a good fight!" A thunderous cheer erupted from the courtyard wall. The villagers' pent-up resentment and fear of many years vanished completely at that moment. The way they looked at me was no longer just awe, but heartfelt respect and love. In less than half an hour, the confession and signature were completed. I carefully put the document away. It was not only a protective charm but also an important bargaining chip for future counterattacks against the county government. Get out of here. I kicked the constable away from my feet. The head constable breathed a sigh of relief, scrambling to his feet and leading the remaining constables out of Xiaojiawen in a disheveled state, not even bothering to ride their horses. As for Zhao San, the villagers bound him hand and foot and locked him in the village's woodshed, where he would face severe punishment. The storm subsided, and night deepened. When the courtyard returned to silence, Suwan brought a basin of warm water to me. Her clear eyes were brimming with tears and unyielding tenderness. She carefully wiped the dust and blood from my hands, her voice trembling slightly. Xiao Lang, you took too much risk today. What if they really mobilized their army? I held her cold little hand and gently pulled her into my arms, saying softly, Silly girl, in this world, giving in will only lead to others taking advantage of you. Only by clenching your fists hard enough can I truly protect you for life. Believe me, this is just the beginning. In the days to come, I will let the whole world know that my wife is the most noble woman in the world. Su Wan buried her head tightly in my chest and nodded heavily. Outside, a gentle breeze rustled through the dilapidated fence, bringing with it the vast, desolate atmosphere of the distant mountains and forests, while inside, the candlelight shone warmly and steadfastly. After this battle, Xiaojiawen became famous throughout the surrounding area. After the county constable returned, he not only didn't dare organize any men to retaliate, but because of the confession document with his fingerprint on it, and the evidence of the county magistrate accepting bribes, his life was firmly in his grasp. Not only did no one dare to cause trouble in Xiaojiawen anymore, but even the wealthy merchants and powerful families in the county towns sent their stewards with generous gifts to personally visit and humbly request to purchase the high-quality ironware and hunting knives that I had personally crafted. The blacksmith shop expanded rapidly, growing from 2 dilapidated rooms into a spacious, modern ancient workshop with its furnaces burning day and night. Using the advanced techniques from the system blueprints, I organized the apprentices to produce high-quality farm tools and defensive weapons on an assembly line. This not only ensured that the entire village enjoyed a life of plenty with meat at every meal, but also transformed Xiaojiawen into a rare and prosperous paradise in this chaotic world. In the early morning, sunlight filters through the sparse tree canopy and falls on the bluestone slabs of the courtyard. I had just stepped out of the workshop, holding a long, gleaming steel sword that had just been quenched. In the courtyard, Suwan was wearing an apron, skillfully hanging up freshly washed clothes to dry. She looked radiant, her skin fair and delicate, and all traces of the humiliation and despair she had felt when she was abused in the Su family were gone. Her eyes and brows were filled with confidence and gentleness. Hearing footsteps, Suwan turned around, saw the knife in my hand, and shook her head with a helpless smile. All you do is deal with these iron blocks all day long. Your breakfast is almost cold. Come and eat. I put down my long sword, walked up to her, and casually tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. I smiled and said, Making money to support the family is important, but having dinner with your wife is even more important. Suwan blushed and gave me a playful glare, but her eyes were full of sweet affection. Just as we were about to sit down for breakfast, we suddenly heard the sound of rapid hoofbeats outside the courtyard gate. Immediately afterwards, a lavishly decorated carriage stopped outside, and the once arrogant county magistrate himself entered with his clerk and several attendants, all smiles on his face. Master Xiao! How have you been lately, Master Xiao? The county magistrate greeted him from afar with clasped hands and a respectful demeanor, like a junior. I didn't even bother to lift my eyelids. I simply picked up a delicate pastry for Suwan and said calmly, I'm just a humble blacksmith, I can't possibly accept such a grand gesture from the magistrate. May I ask what brings you here today, sir? The magistrate wiped the cold sweat from his brow and said with a forced smile, "Not at all. I've come today for 2 reasons. First, to apologize to Master Xiao and his wife for the previous misunderstanding. Second, there's an urgent report from the border. Foreign enemies are pressing in, and we urgently need a batch of high-quality military equipment for defense. Looking across the entire Han Dynasty, only Master Zhao's craftsmanship can solve this pressing problem. The court will not only bestow upon you the title of Grand Master Craftsman, but also offer a generous reward." I raised my head and looked at the feudal local official in front of me, who had once been arrogant and domineering but now had to bow down and beg for mercy. A playful sneer appeared on my lips. In the turbulent and war-torn Han Dynasty, armed with a system and modern knowledge, I rose from a dying, down-on-his-luck blacksmith to the pinnacle of power and wealth. And this was just the beginning. I turned my head and glanced at Suwan beside me, whose eyes were full of affection and pride, and squeezed her hand tightly. "Let's go inside and have dinner, honey." The sun shines brightly on the earth. The road ahead is still long. 3 years later, in early autumn, the autumn wind at the foot of the Taihang Mountains had already brought a hint of coolness, but Xiaojiawen was no longer the impoverished and dilapidated village that it once was, where even the wind couldn't keep out of its way. Walking along the winding cobblestone path into the village, one sees independent houses with blue bricks and gray tiles arranged in a neat and orderly fashion on both sides. The air is filled with the fresh scent of ripening rice and the deep rumble of iron furnaces. This place has become the core headquarters of the Xiao family workshop, a renowned center of heavy industry and artisans throughout the entire Han Dynasty. Hundreds of rigorously trained young craftsmen are working together, from blast furnace iron smelting to precision machining. Each step is well organized, and the beginnings of a modern industrial assembly line are already visible. The creator of all this was sitting in the spacious and bright study in the backyard of the workshop. I put down the latest hydraulic forging hammer design I was drawing using modern drafting standards and gently rubbed my aching temples. Outside the window, the osmanthus flowers in the yard were in full bloom, their golden petals scattered on the ground, emitting a faint fragrance. "Xiao Lang, take a break and drink this bowl of lily and lotus seed soup while it's hot." A gentle voice interrupted my thoughts. Suwan walked in slowly, carrying an exquisite white porcelain bowl. She had long since shed the timid, malnourished awkwardness and shyness she possessed in Sujiwan. She wore a well-tailored sky-blue shoe brocade dress, and a lustrous jade hairpin adorned her dark hair. Her bright eyes shone with an unyielding tenderness and confidence. Time had not left its mark on her face. Instead, it had bestowed upon her the unique grace and serenity of a matriarch. I took the white porcelain bowl, pulled her into my arms and sat her down, inhaling the fragrance of her hair, and teased her with a smile. "My dear wife, you are now a well-known philanthropist and president of the Chamber of Commerce in the whole city, so why are you watching me drink soup every day, like a housekeeper?" Suwan gave me a playful glare and gently poked my chest. "No matter what kind of president I become, in your eyes, aren't I still the poor girl you picked up from the village? If you hadn't married me despite all the gossip in the village, I wouldn't be where I am today. People outside now respectfully call you Master Craftsman Xiao and National Treasure, but you're so busy drawing these blueprints that you barely have time to spend with me and the children." Upon hearing this, I was slightly taken aback, and my gaze instinctively fell towards the corner of the yard. There, a chubby-cheeked little boy, barely 2 years old, was waving a specially made wooden hammer, chasing a large white goose, his clear laughter echoing throughout the yard. That was our son, who inherited my excellent genes and had shown an amazing talent for all kinds of mechanical gears from a young age. Looking at the peaceful and idyllic scene before me, I am filled with endless emotions. Having transmigrated to this war-torn, feudal ancient world where human life was cheap, I once thought my greatest wish was simply to have enough to eat and wear, and to protect those around me. But as the system's energy bar unlocked with my reputation points, and as modern engineering's disruptive power unleashed a devastating impact on this backward world, my fate became inextricably linked to the trajectory of the entire era. After several border wars and internal turmoil, the young new emperor of the court was extremely fond of industry and reform. 2 years ago, the capital sent 3 groups of special envoys, carrying hundreds of thousands of taels of silver and countless fertile fields and beautiful women, to invite me to the capital to serve as Minister of Works, even promising me a high position as a prince of a different surname. But I refused without hesitation. The imperial court, seemingly a place of immense power, is in reality rife with intrigue and factional strife. Rather than becoming a high-ranking employee of the emperor, caught in the eye of the storm, I'd rather stay here at the foot of the Taihang Mountains and build my own technological and industrial paradise. Here, I will hold a monopoly on the most crucial metallurgical technology, firearms principles, and mechanical manufacturing of this era. Whether it's the commander of the Imperial Guards or a wealthy magnate, everyone will respectfully address me as Mr. Xiao. Boom! A cheer erupted from the distant workshop, and someone could be heard shouting, "It's done! The new blast furnace has produced iron!" Suwon looked at me with some concern. "Are you going to be busy again?" I shook my head, put down the porcelain bowl in my hand, and held her warm little hand tightly, my gaze deep and firm. "No matter who comes to me today, it won't matter. The world is vast, but watching the sunset with my wife is the most important thing." As the sun sets, it bathes the peaks of the Taihang Mountains in a dazzling golden red hue. In the yard, the little guy toddled over, grabbed my leg, and called out, "Daddy," in his baby voice. Suwon covered her mouth and chuckled softly. The setting sun cast our family's shadows long and thin. In the grand historical scroll of the Han Dynasty, the name Xiao Ran is destined to become an epoch-making legend. But for me, the most precious legend is always the ever-burning lamp beside me, and every day and night I spent with her,